You might have heard someone talking about a particular piece of music as being in a certain mode, or that piece of music being modal. So in this video we're going to have a look at answering the question, what is a mode exactly? Where do they come from, what are they, and how can we make use of them in our own music making? Perhaps the most straightforward answer to this question, what is a mode, is that a mode is a particular type of scale. And of course a scale is just a collection of pitches that we bring together to help us create a piece of music. They give our melodies and our harmonies a certain character. You remember that we've looked at major and minor scales and the sort of characters that they can produce, and the modes are another set of scales that we use when we want to produce music with a slightly different character. So it turns out that the modes are some of the oldest scales that we know about in Western music, and they originate all the way back to ancient Greek civilization. Now, while we don't have a huge amount of information as to what ancient Greek music sounded like, because there were no recordings back then and no one really knows how it worked, we do have the writings of musicians and scholars and philosophers who told us a little bit about what they believed the different modes could create in terms of a musical character. So they said that some of the modes created a very happy character, others would make people very angry, others would calm people down if they were really upset. A little bit later in music history, around the Middle Ages, say 800 AD, a new set of scales came along which, while not exactly the same as the ancient Greek scales, were based on them and some of the ideas that the philosophers and scholars talked about. And these are the modes that have existed ever since then, and we still use them a huge amount in lots of different styles of music today. You can hear modal music if you go and listen to a Latin mass being sung with Gregorian chant, and you can also hear modes if you listen to a piece of Miles Davis, who was very famous for pioneering the use of modes in jazz music. Now all that stuff's really interesting, but it doesn't really answer our question, what is a mode? In its most basic form, a mode is a white note scale. In other words, if we take two pitches an octave apart and play all of the notes in between that are just the white notes, the letter name notes, then we'll get some kind of mode. Now that's not to say that we can't play a mode using black keys, and we will look at that in a future video, but for now let's just have a quick explore and see if we can find a few modes on our piano keyboard. So here I'm going to pick two notes. Let's go for E and E. There we go, so these are octave E's. I'm going to play them together there. Now to create a mode based on the note of E, what we do is just play all of the white notes in between the low E and the high E. So let's have a listen to that. It should sound very different from any of the scales that we've heard up to this point. Let's have a listen again. So there's some quite interesting combinations of notes coming out there, and to me that scale sounds very different from the major and minor scales that we've already heard. It sounds a bit Spanish to me, or Mediterranean. There's a certain sense of exoticism in that scale. Let's have a listen to another one, a completely different sounding scale. Let's try the scale between F and F here, but only playing the white keys in between. So there's another mode, and each of these white note scales has a particular name and a particular character, and I hope you'll agree that there's a huge amount of possibility here for creating some really interesting musical colours. So let's have a look at each one of these modal scales in turn.